Good morning. Today we're going to talk about invasive species and not the one from outer space. And to help me, we have two people with us today. Steven Pearson, who is the director of the Long Island Invasive Species Management Area, LISMER. And with him, Luke Gervase, who does outreach and education. So tell me about LISMER, what it is, when it was started, what it does.
The Long Island Invasive Species Management Area is a state, New York State DEC contracted group. It's one of the 8 partnerships for regional invasive species management, which short for PRISM, or long for PRISM, and we work to manage invasive species across Long Island, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island.
So all of the island, usually when people say Long Island, they mean Nassau, Suffolk County. They forget that geographically the island also includes Queens and Kings County, better known as Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So you work all over the island on invasive species. Now, not only plant, but also insect and animal invasive species. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And funguses as well.
And
They
funguses.
pop up.
Okay.
Yep, different pathogens.
And you do outreach and education. And what does that entail, Luke?
Sure. So the outreach and education aspect of LISMA is basically me going to different tabling events, Live After 5 in Patchogue, for example.
Sure.
Different big events like that where I would go out there and table, or I'd get brought in to give lectures.
By table, you mean putting together a booth, explaining what you do, explaining what an invasive species is, and the harm of an invasive species.
Exactly. So setting up a booth with our display materials, which we have a lot of, and then giving lectures to certain volunteer groups, citizen groups. Schools as well, yep. I could be brought into elementary, middle, high schools to give lectures as well.
Okay. All right. So let me ask this. Some people would say, oh, that's a beautiful little plant. That's an interesting little bug. And it's not native. But they look at it and they say, oh, that looks nice. Why is that so dangerous? What's the danger with invasive species?
So invasive species will cause some kind of harm. It could be ecological harm, economic harm, or harm to human health.
Okay.
There are a lot of non-native species which are introduced to the area, but they cause no harm. So invasive species are those that cause harm.
Name some that cause harm.
If I could add to it,
Sure.
One is the Asiatic sand sedge, which has been found in areas like the Rockaways, Fire Island.
And what does that do?
So the Asiatic sand sedge is a plant that will grow on sand dunes, and its root system isn't as strong as our native beach grasses.
Right.
Meaning the quality of the dunes and the strength of their capability to handle erosion is lessened to a great degree.
So it could be harmful to the dunes.
It could be harmful to the dunes, which then in storm events could be harmful directly to us as humans.
Right. Well, let's talk about something that a lot of people have talked about further east. We live on the eastern end of the island, and we have a lot of pine barrens. And someone has talked about a little beetle that came from down south called the southern pine beetle, which is really destroying the heck out of our pine forests. And people say, oh, that pine tree is dead, or it's dying. It's turned orange or brown, the little needles, and it's dying, and it looks terrible, and eventually it will die. Explain what the southern pine beetle is.
So the southern pine beetle is a southern species that's been having a range expansion here into New York. It's devastating the pine forest of Long Island and Massachusetts, New Jersey, other regions where it's not native. Its impacts are on the landscape level, so very broad across the full area of the Pine Barrens, as far west as Brentwood, and as far east as Riverhead and the Hamptons and the pine forests of that area. Huge swaths of forest are being impacted by this.
And explain what they do to the pine tree. They come in and
Right. So the beetle burrows into the bark of the pines. The larvae develop in the pines. They introduce fungus to the xylem, the xylem layers of the tree, at which time it ends up killing the tree. They mass attack these trees, and the tree ends up dying. When the larvae emerge from the tree, they move on to the next tree, and they do this in large numbers.
And what's the only way to stop this?
So the management for southern pine beetle are to catch it while the larvae are developing within the tree, and you cut the trees.
So we have to kill the tree to save it.
Right, you kill the tree
It's
to
like
save the
destroy
forest.
a village to save it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right, exactly.
You bring down one tree to save many, many more.
Right.
For every one tree impacted by southern pine beetle, will lead to 10 additional trees in the next generation.
And they have no national predators that would wipe them out.
Not in this region. So
No.
in the south, they do, but up here, they do not. And that's
Wow.
usually a problem with invasive species.
That's bad news. Someone said extreme cold would kill them, but we haven't had extreme cold. I mean, we have a few days that get down near zero, but very few, and not enough to kill these creatures.
Correct.
So let's talk about other things. You're dealing with invasive species. What's LIMPI, which is probably an ally organization that you work with?
Correct. LIMPI is the Long Island Native Plant Initiative. They are the administrative group that manages the Long Island Invasive Species Management Area contract through the DEC. They work to spread.
They work on the plus side.
Yeah, they work.
You work on the negative. They
That's
work
right.
on the plus side.
Yeah, they work to spread native plants and
Right.
and to strengthen the genetic structure of native populations across Long Island.
Right. I know Polly Wygant, who was affiliated, now she works for the Pine Barrens. Very diligent person in trying to promote native species, because many of the species that we have that grow in our gardens or woods are non-native, but they're not invasive or harmful, but there are a number that are. For example, you take a look at a river, a pond, you could have kabamwort. Explain what kabamwort does to things like Peconic Lake.
Sure. So Kabamba or fanwort, it's kind of known as
Right.
both names, most likely introduced through the aquarium trade.
Mhm.
It is now in a number of aquatic systems, freshwater that is, throughout Long Island. This plant can grow to the water's surface and choke out an area of water, but it could also lead to fish kills. When there's such a high biomass of plants, those plants die, they get broken down by bacteria, and the bacteria use the oxygen in the water as they are breaking down these plants.
So a lack of oxygen kills other plants and particularly other fish in the water.
Yes, it's a rare occurrence, but there is the potential for it to happen.
I know they try to clean out the kabamwort out of Peconic Lake out east, which is Peconic River that's dammed up near the Brookhaven Riverhead border. And I know we have invasive species in the lakes in Yapak, which we're trying to get rid of. It's always a problem, and it's harmful to nature. It can destroy lakes and fish. Talking about fish, I would encourage anyone that has an aquarium, don't empty it into our lakes, please.
Please don't.
Explain what happens when that happens.
Sure, so when you go to dump your little red-eared slider and your
Right.
aquatic plants from your aquarium
Right.
into a pond, lake, or river, they can get established in these systems.
And take over and kill some of the other living organisms, fish, plant in that lake, or force them out and change the whole character
Exactly.
of the ecosystem that's involved in that little pond or lake.
They could completely sway the entire ecosystem. Yep.
So if there's a message that you want to convey to people about invasive species, about what we have to do, what would that message be?
Prevention, that's really the biggest one, is, if you can prevent it before it ever becomes a thing, then we never have the problem. So
And
kind of
how can people prevent those things? Give
through
some
knowledge.
examples.
Knowledge and early detection, that's
Okay.
That's what we preach.
And you, if someone had a question, you could answer it. I know we're going to put your telephone number, contact information, and your webpage address up there so people can get in touch with you, or at least can go on your webpage and learn a little bit more. What else would you like people to know about Lismore?
We are available to aid the people of our region, so
Long Island.
Long Island, manage in terms of management for large properties, small properties, to perform, to come out to different events, to go to schools, to go to garden clubs, give presentations, and to answer questions for the citizens of this region.
And there's enough native plants that we don't need foreign, and particularly invasive or destructive plants or creatures without introducing into the atmosphere. So whatever you do, don't flush your alligator down the toilet.
Exactly. Right. The state and the county have prohibited and regulated species, so definitely be sure to check your list before you're planting new plants in your yard, that you're not spreading any of these prohibited or regulated species.
Like, is lithium a plant? Purple plant?
Purple loosestrife.
Right.
Purple loosestrife is on the prohibited.
Right. And why is that?
So purple loosestrife and many other of the prohibited species can grow in great abundance when they're introduced into the native systems. These will outcompete many of the native plants
And destroy our native plants.
Right, and you'll end up with a monoculture of one plant rather than a
diversity
a diverse
of many
ecosystem.
plants.
Correct.
And the king of all invasives is bamboo.
Sure. Yeah.
We've legislated against bamboo,
Mhm.
and it is a problem because some people, first of all, it doesn't need a lot of attention,
Right.
but it grows vociferously and has a root system. What happens with bamboo is not the guy that planted it, although it gets out of hand. It's the root system that goes under the fence to the next two neighbors, and they're covered with it, and they can't. Their lawnmower can't keep up.
Correct.
So explain a little bit about bamboo. There's another. I mean, that's the king of invasives, at least in suburbia, because you get a lot of complaints from neighbors
Oh, yeah.
that they don't want bamboo. Their neighbor planted some, and now it's taken over the whole neighborhood.
Sure. So I definitely speak, excuse me, to a lot of people who have issues with bamboo. Like you mentioned, it can grow under fences. It could even end up damaging pipes in your home, or even the potential to hurt your home's foundation.
So water mains, pipes, foundation of the home. The root system is an extremely strong system,
It's very strong.
and no matter what you do, it seems like you really can't kill it.
Yeah. So to manage the bamboo, it takes several years of active management.
And by active management,
Cutting the stalks, digging the roots. Anytime a new shoot comes up, making sure you're diligent about removing that. So it takes a lot of effort to manage even small bamboo infestations.
and it's not native to Long Island.
Correct,
It is
it's
not.
not.
And while there's a lot of non-native plants that are in our gardens and in our woodlands, they don't pose a threat. Bamboo clearly poses a threat to choke out all other plants and take over. And again, a monoculture,
Yep.
no diversity, and native plants, we see less and less of them surviving on Long Island because they're under attack.
Right. So when you are planting in your yards or giving gifts to people, it's always good to use native plants. Limpy, the Native Plant Initiative, just this past weekend had their native plant sale.
Oh, wow.
Sold 20 plus species of native plants.
Suffolk community in Riverhead?
No, we're located now at the Sisters of St.
Joseph in Brentwood.
In Brentwood, correct.
Okay.
So,
But you know what? If you could leave us, we'll put Limpy webpage there up as well.
course.
Because while you guys work against the invasives, they try to promote the natives.
right, and
yeah.
we work in tandem with
Right.
Limpy because part of our charge is to restore native systems. So if we work to manage an invasive species, what can we replace that with?
Right.
We'd like to replace it with native plants and to encourage their growth and their development to restore native systems and native communities across the region.
So, for those who are interested in what Long Island has to offer, and our native plants, and watching out for our native plants and animals who are threatened today, clearly threatened, LISMR does a great job in protecting us against invasive species, and they're not the ones from outer space. They're the ones right in our backyard. And LIMPI does a great job in promoting our native species, and both of those organizations will have their information, their webpage up on the screen. But I want to thank Luke, I want to thank you. Stephen, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank you for the work your organization does. It's a great benefit to the biodiversity of Long Island and to Long Island native plants. So thank you for the work you do. And if anyone wants to contact them, just go to the webpage. Thank you for being on.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.